Psalm 73. Surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold. For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. For their callous hearts comes iniquity. Their evil imaginations have no limits. They scoff and speak with malice. With arrogance, they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore their people turn to them and drink up waters in abundance. They say, how would God know? How does the Most High know anything? This is what the wicked are like, always free of care. They go on amassing wealth. Surely in vain I have kept my heart pure and have washed my hands in innocence. All day long I have been afflicted, and every morning brings new punishments. If I had spoken out like that, I would have betrayed your children. When I tried to understand all of this, it troubled me deeply till I entered the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their final destiny. Surely you'll place them on slippery ground. You cast them down to ruin. How suddenly are they destroyed, completely swept away by terrors. They are like a dream when one awakes. When you arise, Lord, you will despise them as fantasies. When my heart was grieved and my spirit embittered, I was senseless and arrogant. I was a brute beast before you. Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Those who are far from you will perish. You destroy all who are unfaithful to you. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds.
My name is Brian Phipps. I'm one of the pastors here, and I would like to add my happy Father's Day to all the fathers here as well. Those of you that may be online, sitting at home with a remote control, enjoying the barbecue, whatever it is that you're doing. Those folks up at in Lansing, the Brothers in Blue, the guys that we love there very much, whether you're at the Speedway, whether you're at the South Sanctuary here in Lenexa, or right here in this room, the North Sanctuary here at Lenexa, where I can see all of your smiling faces. Glad to be with you this morning. I love being a dad, and here's why. Aren't they good-looking kids? Good thing their mama is so pretty. That's Sam on the left. He's almost 17, and he loves to bag groceries at Price Chopper. So you may see him there on occasion. Hannah's 19. She just finished her first year of college. And that's Caleb, my just out of 6th grade, trying to move towards 7th grade, but hasn't lost the 5th grade jokes yet. We're waiting for that to happen. Eventually, we will get middle school out of that. One of the things that I've done this year, and I invite you to do with me, is kind of look back, whether you're a mom, whether you're a dad, grandpa, whatever, or even if you're preparing this, join us in this journey of kind of looking back over the highlight reels of being a parent. I did that, and I've kind of got a little slideshow up here of the 3 kids. For Hannah, who's on the left, you know, my job for her all the way through her growing up is just to tell her how beautiful she is, inside and out. And so since she came home from the hospital, it's just, hey, beautiful, hey, gorgeous, hey, princess, whatever it is. And so I've done that forever. And then there was that prom, you know, that first prom where she came down, and I just went, is that even legal? You know, Just such a beautiful girl inside and out. And that was just one of those moments where I just went, wow. That is such a big deal. For the guys, it wasn't telling them they're beautiful. It's telling them that they're wild men, that they're strong, that they have what it takes, that I believe in them. We went down to a ropes course in southern Missouri, and Caleb was a little bit afraid of that. He's probably 7, 8 years old, and you can see him halfway up that thing, and he was just going. And Daddy is losing his voice, saying, "You got this, you're a wild man." And he not only got to the top of that, but they just kept going to places I cannot tell their mother about. It was awesome, you know? And then over here on the right is Sam when he got his first par. And so I'm thinking back through all these, cool memories of the kids. And it's just fun on Father's Day to be able to check out that highlight reel. But I got to be honest with you, there's another highlight reel, and I would love to call it the blooper reel. But it's more like a blunder reel. Perhaps you can join me in this. Poor choices as a dad. Usually around correction, usually it was, trying to correct the wrong things or correct the right things the wrong way, or priorities that were made that were either helpful priorities or not helpful priorities. And there are so many of those memories as well. They actually can dwarf out the good highlight reel, if you know what I mean, over time. And I found that as I look back over those things and take an inventory of all the blunders, not bloopers, but blunders, it seems to me that the worst ones happened when anger was involved. I kind of want to see if you relate to this verse in Psalm 73. I was so foolish and ignorant, the psalmist writes. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you. Anybody there? You got moments where you just look back and go, oh, I want to erase that one from the books. One for me was with my son, Sam, oldest son, middle kid. His older sister, when we had conflict, I would just get, a little amped up, and she would just kind of go back to doing whatever needed to be done. And so I was kind of used to that. Sam, and if he sensed injustice, he was digging in to the bone. He was going all the way down. And I didn't know how to deal with that. And I remember that just triggered my fuse the wrong way one day. And I was in his room. I remember where we were. And I was so angry that I actually reached around, this is ugly, reached around his ears and started to lift him up. It's like I wanted to just grab him and look him right in the eye. And I just don't call whoever it is. I put him down before he even got a quarter of an inch up. But I asked myself, how in the world did anger get this bad? To where I would actually start to hurt my kid. That can't happen again. I've apologized to him 1,000 times. He's probably forgiven me 1,000 times, but he hasn't forgotten it, because you can't undo that. In fact, he just reminded me of this recently. He's like, thanks, that's really great. They're bringing that back up, And here's the reality. We can't allow anger to do that at all. It's unacceptable. There's no place for that kind of anger. And I stand as one dad among many dads, and one parent among many parents, and one person among all of us that says anger gets the best of us. What do we do with this thing? That's where we want to go today. We are in a 4-week series called The Heart of the Story. And it's a part of kind of the whole story thing we've been going through all year. But the book that we picked up at the beginning of the year and have been going through is only the narrative. So during the summer, we're taking a break from the book, and we're going to look at the Psalms and Proverbs and stuff like that. This one focuses on the Psalms. It's the heart of the story. And when we start talking about anger and how we deal with that, it's very important for us to start with a very spiritual experience that a lot of us have had with this picture. How many of you know what this is? It's not really all that spiritual, but what is it? Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. It's the album cover. And what Pink Floyd was referring to back in that time is the appearance of our moon to not rotate. We only see one side of the moon. And so the assumption is that there is a dark side that never gets seen. But for us, really, we never do get to see it. The way the moon rotates around the earth is interesting. Just the math and the timing. It appears that we always see just one side of the moon. And it rotates around the earth like this. And you may be wondering, why in the world is he doing that? Here's the picture. And if you catch this, I do believe it can be absolutely life-changing. I believe that we as Christ followers have hearts that are much like that. Our hearts experience all kinds of emotions, good emotions, bad emotions. And what we do is we allow the good emotions to be seen by God and everyone else. You following me? Like when we come to church, if we're feeling joy, we let people see that. If we're feeling, hopeful or encouraged or whatnot, we don't mind sharing that. But there's this ugly stuff back here. That's kind of the dark side of the heart. And that's where anger is, and that's where jealousy is, and that's where fear is, and that's where depression. All these things are back here, and it's almost like there's this unspoken rule that we're not allowed to turn that side of the heart towards God and people, because that's just wrong. It's just wrong to feel that way. Well, the Psalms is a book that's been written. It's actually a song book filled with 150 songs that God's people sang throughout the story. And they, in doing so, give validity to these emotions and tell us what we need to do is stop hiding them back there, but actually turn them toward God, because there is a righteous action and a righteous activity that those emotions can be a part of if we truly do give them to God. Here's the big idea for today. So if you've got your notes, go ahead and open those up and write this in. When it comes to anger, pent-up anger leads to destruction. We've seen that. We've seen it in our lives. I just shared how it was happening in mine. And if we keep it there on the dark side of the heart, then it'll just lead to destruction and more destruction. But anger poured out to God leads to life. Pent-up anger leads to destruction, but anger poured out to God leads to life. We're going to be looking at Psalm 73 today, the one that was there with the punching bag. And boy, am I glad I'm not a punching bag. That guy's he's a stout fella. But that song, 73, Psalm 73, is a song of a guy telling a story about how his heart almost got lost because he was experiencing anger. And it starts out kind of giving a summary of what happened and then walking through how anger started to take over his life. And then there's a moment where that changed. And our goal for today is to walk through that, see how anger may be developing in our own hearts, and then encourage us all to do a similar turn the way that psalmist did, turning that anger into God, doing the hard stuff with him and seeing what he will do with that anger. Sound good? That's where we're headed today. Let's look at verses 1 and 2. If you've got your bulletin, they're right there. Hopefully they might be up on the screen as well. Verses 1 and 2. This is what the guy said. Truly God is good to Israel, to those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, I almost lost my footing. Here's a guy who been in church all of his life. He knows God's good. He's experienced God's goodness. He's heard all the stories about how God's been good to his country and his people, and he knows God's good. But then some circumstances changed. As we read through the psalm, I think we're all going to find out that he got really sick, and it didn't look like it would change at all. And that's when things started to change for him. Moving on to verse 3 through 5 and 7. He says, here's what happened. I envied the proud when I saw them prosper despite their wickedness. In other words, I looked at people that didn't care about God. And here's what I saw. They seem to live such painless lives. Their bodies are so healthy and strong. Unlike mine. You can read in between the lines there. They don't have troubles like other people. These fat cats have everything their hearts could ever wish for. I don't know if you can see it, so let's go ahead and fill it in the blank. Poured out anger, at least for this guy, and I believe for us as well, distorts reality. When we start to get angry inside and we pin that stuff up and keep anger pinned up inside of us, it starts to give us kind of that Facebook reality, which is distorted. You know what I'm talking about? Where you just, if you're on Facebook or Twitter and you look through there, all you see is the good stuff going on. And you think, oh man, nobody else has any trouble. I can't believe them. And then you see people on there that you know don't have things right with God. And if you've been one of these people that's tried to get things right with God and things are not going well for you and you see it going well for others, regardless of the circumstance, reality starts to get skewed. And that starts an internal combustion that, if left unattended, if not poured out, ultimately pushes us to the same place it pushed the psalmist. It pushes us toward disbelief. Look what he says there in verse 13. He goes through this exercise and he says, did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? Anybody felt this one before? Feel like you've been doing the right thing, making the sacrifices, not doing the wrong stuff, doing the right stuff, and you still have junk come your way that you didn't deserve? And you see other people and it just gets nasty. Here's what we tend to do in those circumstances. We tend to ask two questions. We ask first, God, are you real? I mean, I'm knocking on the door and I don't hear you answering. Are you real? Or if we believe he's real, it's hard to believe that he's good. You follow me? It's hard. And we ask those two questions. I love to fish. I want to illustrate this idea, give you a picture where our psalmist must have been. I'm going to be here in about 9 days. I look forward to fishing. This is my brother-in-law's boat. He sent me about 27 of these pictures already this spring. It says, don't have that in Kansas, do you? So I give thanks for my brother-in-law and move on. No, when I'm down there, when our family goes down there to Orlando, we go out fishing, and I can't wait. But I also have a passion for the kind of fishing that Jesus talks about. Come and let's fish for men and women. And those two values, those two passions, those two loves came into conflict about 15 years ago. I was a pastor in Central Florida. I had opportunities to stay in Florida. One of the interesting issues, though, is that most of the churches in our denomination did not share the same passion and strategy for the catching people part as I did. And those churches, as much as they had this kind of a upward mobility type of thing for me and would keep me down there doing this kind of fishing, I couldn't do the real kind of fishing that I wanted to be able to say that I did when I get to heaven one day. And so my wife and I made a big decision. We ended up moving to Charlotte instead, kind of one of these lateral to down kind of decisions in order to do the right thing. And I was like, wasn't looking for credit for that or anything. It's the right thing. This would be good long term until our house in Florida did not sell. And if you've ever been in one of those situations where you think you've given yourself plenty of time for the house to sell, especially when the market was going up back then, and then your house sits there when you've done the right thing. Our entire savings that we had saved up all of a sudden was gone. We find ourselves in a situation where we're going, God, are you there? Your homeboy did the right thing now. I mean, I watched some of these other guys not make similar priorities, and they're getting their houses paid off. God, if you're there, are you good? Because I'm having a hard time seeing it right now. You tracking? This is where this guy was. The crazy thing is, the more he thought about it, the worse it got. Listen to what he says. So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but what a difficult task it is. Basically, here's what he's saying. Pent-up anger is exacerbated by rationalization. The more you think about it, the more insane you get. And he started spinning himself out of control at this point. And this is where we turn into people, one of three different types of people. One of them is a skunk. You know these types. They wait for you to get close, and then they just spew all kinds of nasty all over you. Yeah, you either are that person or you know that person. The other type of person with this kind of anger, when they're boiled up and this uptight, is they pull the turtle move, and they just kind of duck in under the shell. The problem is the heat doesn't turn off when they go inside the shell, but the heat doesn't hurt other people, it hurts them. And actually, psychosomatic type of symptoms that end up happening over time because there's so much crushing down on the heart. And then there's the artists with anger. Those are the passive-aggressive types. Those are the ones that figure out how to get at you, but not look as angry and explosive as the skunk. All three of them are toxic. All three of them stay there and boil. And if you're with me, you're tracking with this idea that it's almost okay and almost applauded to be an angry, ugly skunk in our country. It's going up to levels in the public arena that are just a little crazy. We need a place for this stuff to go, don't we? I mean, I want to see this stuff eradicated. This stuff has to go. But it begs a question right here. Why does trying to think this thing through not work? What is it that when you're angry and you keep doing the rational stuff, that it just gets worse instead of getting better? And I think if you walk with me here at this point, again, this could be a really life-changing idea. Hearts don't think. They feel. Hearts don't think, they feel. The brain has a spot when it comes to healing and working through anger, but it doesn't have the first spot. Here's what happens to a heart. A heart feels anger because of betrayal. The heart feels anger because of injustice. Your heart probably felt a significant amount of anger when you heard what happened in Orlando this week. And it should. There's nothing that can make that make sense at all. It doesn't belong in this world. Isolation doesn't belong in this world. Injustice doesn't belong in this world. Betrayal doesn't belong in the world God created. The world has been broken by sin, and those things happen, but the heart is going, I don't know how to make sense of it, and we shouldn't. But the heart can be healed as we do what? As we get over the whole dark side of the moon mentality. And we actually turn that anger toward God and allow Him to have it. This is what happened to the psalmist in Psalm 73. He said, Then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood the destiny of the wicked. When you arise, O Lord, you will laugh at their silly ideas, as a person laughs at dreams in the morning. Do you hear the shift? It's almost as if that one activity of turning his heart to God and allowing that anger to come out toward God, however it did. It must have been a lot like a punch in the ceiling when you're driving your car and you're just angry and you just punch the ceiling and then that's what I did in Charlotte. Just got to that point where I was so mad. Just punched the ceiling, and when I thought, man, what an idiot punching my own car, because it hurt, for one. And two, it's I'm just a brute beast again. Here I am. And then when that happened, it just poured out to God. God, how can you do this? I was doing it right. I made your decision. I didn't do this for me. How can you not be there? And somehow, in the pouring out of that anger to Him, not other people, not on myself, to Him, lifted out from under the one tree that I was under in order to see the whole forest, to see the big timeline. And something changed. Here's something to pay attention to. His circumstances didn't change. He's still sick. But something significant changed. I remember when I punched the ceiling and I had my little implosion with God. I remember sitting there on the side of the road and kind of having this little conversation with God. He said something like, Phipps, we've been here before? Yeah, we've been here before. Everything work out all right? Yeah, it worked out pretty good, actually. You used that for helping me become a bigger and better man. Have I changed any, Brian? No, you haven't changed, God. Trust me to have this? Phipps? Yeah. Circumstances didn't change. House didn't sell for several more months. But I'll never forget how much he helped me persevere, even though those circumstances hadn't changed. Here's the neat thing, what happened. Don't have the time to tell the whole story here, but those several months after that moment of pouring that anger out to God was a time when God met our family's needs in supernatural ways. Just crazy. Man, I'd have the check written out for a bill that needed to be paid. I had it in the envelope, had a stamp on it. That's what we used to have to do before that online banking thing worked out. But I couldn't send them because the money wasn't in the bank. And then in supernatural ways, God brought that stuff. Here's what he was doing. And this is all hindsight. Hindsight's 20/20, and God makes sense when you look in the rearview mirror. He doesn't always make sense in real time. But looking back, it's pretty interesting to me that God was teaching me that he could pull through supernatural experiences. He wanted to develop some trust in me because one day he was going to ask me to leave my denomination of 20 years and go plant a church under a guy I didn't even know, whose name is Dan Sutherland. You guys might know him. He's the reason I'm here now. And I can't imagine not having that education called going through that hard time and having the privilege of turning my angry heart to God. Here's what happens. When we turn our anger toward God, it brings us back to reality. That's what happened to that guy. We've heard it. You see it. It's amazing. Went into the sanctuary, and I got the perspective again. It also brought about healing. Then I realized that my heart was bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I got perspective, not just with the circumstances out there with other people, but I got the circumstances about myself. It brought me back into reality, but it doesn't just do that. As we've seen with this story in mind, it strengthens my belief in God. Listen to what he says. My health may fail, and my spirit may grow weak. There it is. See it? The sickness is still there. But God remains the strength of my heart. He is mine forever. God's helping him persevere. And he's no longer angry. He's back in reality, able to deal with it all at once. But this isn't the end of this story. It'd be really cool, actually, even if this was the end. I mean, I think we do need to get to a point where the anger that's continuing to pop up goes down in all of us. It'd be great if there were less and less people ready to cut you off on the highway and then end your life with the frustration that comes after that or whatever, right? That'd be great. But what you need to hear today is God's not just interested in helping your anger that's broken go down just so that we live more peaceful lives. No. That's just the beginning. God has a bigger plan for your anger, and that's what the last blank points to. He sanctifies my anger for righteous purposes. So much of us are convinced that anger is only back here on the dark side of the soul. That's the only place for it, because we've never known that God could use that anger actually for righteous purposes. But if you look at the life of Jesus, you see a very different story. Jesus became angry and yet never sinned. And the most popular story, of course, is when he goes into the temple and he turns the tables over. It says he was angry. What was going on there? He wasn't angry about money being used around the church. He was angry that they had used the Gentile courts, which is the only place that the outsiders could come in and begin to experience the presence of God. And the people that were there, God's people, had actually used that place in order to start selling all the stuff for the sacrifices. And Jesus came in and said, if you think this is just for you and not for the rest of the world, we're going to be done with that. So he takes the tables and throws them out. He got angry because God's work in the rest of the world could not be done. But here's the interesting thing. That story is rather insignificant compared to the anger that Jesus felt when he stood outside the tomb of Lazarus. The story is captured in John chapter 11. His friend Lazarus had died. And Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, were upset that he wasn't there in order to keep him from dying, to actually heal him when he was still sick. But Jesus had all this in mind. He knew what was going on. And when he showed up, he talked to the two sisters, and then he set his face toward the tomb where Lazarus was entombed and dead and starting to do what dead bodies do. And if you read the scripture carefully, it says that Jesus, when he started to turn his attention toward the tomb, it said that he groaned. Now you got to look that word up, because that translation is extremely sterile. What it means is that he just had this deep, deep, deep anger going on. And the picture is like a bull over in Spain with a little red cloth hanging in from him from a matador. And it's like he started to just dig in the dirt and started to snort on the inside, because he was not just looking Lazarus' death in the eyes. He was looking at death as a whole. The death that sin brought into our world by us. And he said, I'm so angry at death, and I'm so angry with how death manifests itself in brokenness and isolation and murder and all these other things. And Jesus said, I am going after it, and I'm going to kill it. And he grunts, and he goes over there, and he raises Lazarus from the dead. And that was just simply a picture of his focus toward the cross, where he would offer himself as a sacrifice so that he could enter into death and then conquer it through his own sinless life and come out on the other side so that we could follow him into life. Anger isn't a bad thing. It can be used unrighteously, and that's what we're used to. But that isn't God's plan for anger. And what I would love to see is not only our anger go down in the unrighteous fashion, but that anger through Westside Family Church and all of Christ's church around the world would swell up against social injustice, against any brokenness that Jesus came to conquer with his life and the power of his Holy Spirit living alive in you and me. Does this make sense? Wow. A couple of months ago, Rob did the sermon about David and Goliath. And he said, every one of you has a Goliath. You got something going on in this world that you would love to just take down the way David took it down. And every one of you has a sling. Something that God could use to take down that Goliath. Figure out what the sling is. Figure out what the Goliath is. That's all part of our discipleship program here. And that is what will allow anger to turn from the broken, nasty stuff into anger that God can use. You know, I had a picture of Caleb up here on the screen not long ago, climbing that rope to get to the top. My story is Sutherland was one of the first guys to look at me as a man and say, Phipps, I think you have what it takes. I think you can make a difference. So now my Goliath is all the untapped potential all over the world. I had untapped potential. That's my Goliath. Can't stand seeing men and women who have anger beating them down instead of God having that anger use them to make a difference in the world. That's what I'm giving the rest of my life for. What will you give the rest of your life for? Here's the big idea of the whole series. Bringing this all back around. God will write his story in me as I engage him with my heart and soul. In our whole heart. Not just the shiny part, but even the parts that are broken. It's a great place at Westside to be able to work through anger, to begin to pour it out in a healthy way. Lifelines are it. You heard about them in the polls. You see a mention of them there in your bulletin. You can go online, hear stories, and find a place if anger is something that's got you down. to go find some help and some healing and some restoration so you can join in that great movement of God. If you'd like to talk to somebody, the Lifeline folks are right out there in the Connection Center and would love to connect to you. You can also connect with one of our prayer partners down here. They love praying with you. They love being able to offer you whatever next steps that you might need. Anger is a big deal. And I would encourage you not to leave without tackling that thing and being prayed for today. Honored you be with us. Happy Father's Day. See you next time.